You're crouched in tall grass 100,000 years ago, and the sky has caught fire. A wall of orange is eating the savanna in front of you, close enough that the heat is drying your eyes. And every single animal around you is doing the sensible thing. The gazelles are gone, the lions are gone. Everything with legs is running the other way. And you, for reasons your instincts are screaming against, are walking toward it. Because you've figured out something no other animal on Earth has. The fire leaves food behind. This is the moment we usually skip. We picture a caveman rubbing two sticks together, getting a spark, and inventing fire in one heroic afternoon. That story is almost completely wrong. So how did our ancestors actually get fire? The real answer is stranger, slower, and honestly, a little embarrassing. Here's the first thing to understand. Nobody invented fire. Fire was already everywhere. Lightning hit dry grass. Volcanoes leaked it. Wildfires burned across whole continents every dry season. No humans required. Fire was one of the most normal things in the ancient world. The hard part was never making it happen. The hard part was being the one creature dumb enough or clever enough to walk into it on purpose. And that's what our ancestors did. When a wildfire swept through, they learned to follow the burn line. The ground behind a fire is a buffet. Roasted seeds, baked tubers, and animals that didn't run fast enough, already cooked and waiting. So the first relationship humans had with fire wasn't making it. It was scavenging it, the same way you'd scavenge a carcass. We have physical proof this goes back almost unimaginably far. In Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa, archaeologists found ash and burnt bone deep inside the cave in layers dated to around 1 million years ago. And some newer analysis pushes that back even further. Deep inside a cave where a wildfire can't reach. Which means somebody carried the fire in, and that somebody wasn't even us. It was probably Homo erectus, an ancestor with a brain smaller than yours. So an early human, 1 million years ago, walked into a burning landscape, grabbed a piece of it, and brought it home. Which raises an obvious, terrible problem. What happens when it goes out? Because they could use fire, they just couldn't make it. Sit with how bad that is. Imagine your entire civilization depends on a candle you found, and you have no matches, no lighter, no way to relight it if the flame ever dies. That was the human condition for over 1 million years. So they did the only thing they could. They babysat it. Fire became something you kept alive constantly, like a pet that would kill you if you neglected it. Someone had to feed it through the night. Someone had to shield it from rain. When the group moved, someone had to carry a smoldering ember, cupped and coaxed for miles, praying it didn't die on the walk. This is the world's first job, and it might be the most stressful one ever invented. No vacation, no sick days, and if you fall asleep on shift, everyone wakes up cold and furious. We can actually see this happening. At a site in Israel with a name that's a mouthful, Gesher Benot Yaakov, archaeologists found hearths by an ancient lakeshore dating back around 790,000 years. Same spots used over and over. Burnt flint, charred seeds, cooked fish. And the fuel was mostly driftwood. The branches the lake washed up on the shore, which tells you something almost sweet. They didn't hunt for the perfect firewood. They set up camp wherever the landscape handed them a steady supply. They organized their whole lives around not letting the flame die. Which makes you ask the real question, why? Why would you build your entire existence around babysitting a fire? What was fire actually giving them that was worth all that? The answer might be the single most important thing that ever happened to the human body. Cooking. There's a Harvard scientist named Richard Wrangham who put forward an idea that's now famous, sometimes called the cooking hypothesis. He noticed that around 1.8 million years ago, our ancestors changed shape fast. The brain ballooned by something like half in a relatively short window. And at the same time, the guts shrank, the jaw shrank, the teeth got smaller. Wrangham's argument is that cooking did this. Raw food is a terrible deal. A chimp spends around 6 hours a day just chewing. But cooking breaks food down before it ever hits your mouth. It unlocks calories, softens everything, does the digestion for you. Cook your food, and suddenly you can afford a giant, ravenous brain because you're not spending all day gnawing. Now, I have to be honest here because this is exactly where lesser channels lie to you. This idea is not settled. Plenty of scientists push back hard. they point out that the brain kept growing during stretches where the fire evidence is thin, and that meat eating alone might explain a lot of it. So treat it as the leading theory, not a proven fact. But even the critics agree on the basic point. Fire was worth everything. It was warmth, it was safety from predators who wouldn't cross a flame, it was light, and it may well be the reason you're smart enough to watch this. Which is why the next part is so genuinely bizarre. Because for all of that, for over 1 million years, nobody could make fire. Let that land. The most valuable thing in the human world, the thing entire lives were organized around protecting, and the actual skill of producing it on demand did not exist. We were a species running the most advanced technology on the planet with no idea how to turn it on. We could only find the on switch by accident in a lightning storm and then guard it with our lives. And here's the part that really gets under my skin. We don't have a fossil of the eureka moment. There's no ancient snapshot of the first person who made a spark on purpose. That heroic stick-rubbing scene in your head, it has basically never been found in the deep past. And there's a good reason for that, which is its own kind of frustrating. Wood rots. That's the whole problem. There are really 2 ways to make fire from scratch. The first is friction, the classic image, spinning a wooden stick against another piece of wood until the heat and dust catch and smolder. It works. People still do it. But it's made of wood, and wood does not survive hundreds of thousands of years in the ground. So the most iconic fire-making method in human history is almost completely invisible to archaeology. It could be ancient. It could be very ancient. We may simply never find the proof because it turned to dirt. The second method leaves a trace. It's percussion. You take flint and you strike it against a lump of iron pyrite, also known as fool's gold, and the two throw off a shower of hot sparks. That method drops evidence. Pyrite doesn't rot. Heat-shattered stone doesn't rot. So if we're ever going to catch our ancestors in the act of making fire, this is the trail we have to follow. So how far back does that trail actually go? For a long time, the answer was surprisingly recent. The oldest hard evidence of humans making fire was only about 50,000 years ago, from Neanderthals in France, who left behind pyrite and flint. 50,000 years. On the human timeline, that's practically yesterday. And then, in December of 2025, that number got demolished. In a field in Barnham, in Suffolk, England, a team led by the British Museum announced they'd found something extraordinary. A patch of clay baked to over 700 degrees Celsius. Flint hand axes cracked and shattered by heat. And 2 small fragments of iron pyrite. The same spot had been burned again and again, which rules out a random wildfire and points to a hearth someone lit deliberately more than once. The date? Around 400,000 years ago. That's not a small correction. That pushes fire-making back by roughly 350,000 years in a single discovery. And the clincher is the pyrite. Pyrite is rare in that part of England. The nearest source is something like 40 miles away, so somebody didn't stumble onto it. Somebody understood what pyrite does, went and got it, and carried it home specifically to make fire. That's not luck, that's knowledge. And here's the twist that should genuinely stop you. 400,000 years ago is before our species existed. Homo sapiens only shows up around 300,000 years ago, which means the first known fire makers on Earth weren't us. They were early Neanderthals, or a cousin called Homo heidelbergensis. The people who cracked the most human trick of all weren't human, not the way you are. Now, one honest caveat, because it matters. This is a single site, and the researchers themselves say we need more before we call it settled. And remember, friction fire could be far older and simply invisible. But as of right now, the oldest we can prove anyone made fire on purpose. It wasn't our species that did it first. So here's the whole strange shape of it. Fire wasn't discovered once, it was discovered twice, and the gap between those 2 discoveries is the widest in human history. First, we learned to use fire, more than 1 million years ago, by walking into wildfires and stealing it. Then, unbelievably, we spent over 1 million years unable to make the thing we depended on completely, carrying embers and guarding flames and living in quiet terror of a rainy week. And only near the end of that story did somebody, probably not even one of us, finally figure out how to strike a spark and skip the lightning entirely. Which brings us to you right now with a lighter in a drawer somewhere that you've never once thought of as a miracle. You can make fire without looking. A knob, a click, a spark, and you'll never spend a single night of your life feeding a flame so your family doesn't freeze. It took our ancestors more than 1,000,000 years to get from, "Please don't let it die," to click. You did it this morning to heat up coffee, and you didn't even notice.